Now, let me introduce our second cohort of students. We have student presentations, part 2. We have 3 wonderful students joining us today. They also all have presented at the SACNAS conference. And today we asked them to share their experience applying and presenting at the national conference. Today we have Matthew Mitchell. He's attending Texas A&M College of Medicine. We have Alejandra Rosario from University of Puerto Rico. We have Paula Montefar-Surya from New York University. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And I will give the floor to Matthew at the moment.
All right, hello everybody. Let me share my screen. Thank you all for coming. I just jumped out of surgery. Like our wonderful host said, I attend Texas A&M College of Medicine. I am in my 3rd year of medical school here, currently on my OB-GYN rotation. So I've had 3 surgeries this morning, the last of which I actually just pulled out a 15-pound ovarian mass from an abdomen. It's a huge incision. So jumped out of that real quick and came over here to give this presentation. I'm very excited to be here. So I'll first talk about my path to medical school, and then after that, I will kind of talk a little bit about some of the work that I'm doing at the moment. So first of all, can everybody hear me just fine? I will take the silence as a yes. So my path to research, let me see, there's a chat. Okay. I first started research when I was an undergraduate. I went to a small school here in Texas called Midwestern State University. And the biggest challenge for me there was that this university is actually a proclaimed liberal arts university. So finding anything in the sciences was very, very challenging. So I was able to find a small Alzheimer's lab there, but I knew pretty soon after that I would need to look beyond the walls of my institution in order to find research to make me a quality applicant. So after doing that Alzheimer's work there, I did that for like a year or two. That was kind of just something I had on the back burner for a really long time. I started applying to internships for the summer. That would be the first one I did was what I did with Parkinson's work here at University of North Texas. That's in Fort Worth, kind of close to Dallas. That was the summer between my sophomore and junior years of college. And there, that one really inspired a love of research in me. I have a picture here of me doing brain surgery on some rats. That was for my Parkinson's work that I did there. And at the end of that, summer, I put together a poster, and luckily I was able to get a full scholarship, I guess you can say, to present at ABRCAMS, which is another conference very similar to SACNAS. I hope nobody in the SACNAS, I hope they don't take offense to that, but it's a really another big conference. And I think that being at that conference really changed my life, because I presented my work on these rats here. And at that conference, I met some people that changed my life forever, specifically a man named Dr. De La Cruz, who works at the National Institutes of Health. It just at booths that were set up there to recruit students who were doing research. And I handed out like 25, 30, maybe even like 50 business cards in my like 2 or 3 days there. And just going a little forward to my tips for success, those business cards, I really feel like helped me out. They were pretty key to my success, because I followed up with like emails to so many different people. And it ended up being that the National Institutes of Health gave me an opportunity to complete an internship there the following summer, which was between my junior and senior year. And there I was doing some work on the frontotemporal dementia. And that one was very, very influential on my life, I would say. They challenged me to think in ways that I hadn't been taught to think before. So at the end of that summer, I started putting out some applications to different conferences, and probably the best one, or my favorite one that I was able to do, was go to Hawaii, and it was all paid for both by SACNAS and the NIH. So I had the government pay for my flight to Hawaii, and I stayed there for a while, did a lot of fun things, also presented. And luckily I was in the neuroscience category. I was honored to be one of the winners of that category at SACNAS 2019. So that was, I think, the last one that they had in person before COVID hit. And I think all of my research really, truly put me at an advantage when it came to applying to medical school. I had some really good offers, and I decided that I would next take my talents to Texas A&M University College. Texas A&M University College of Medicine here in College Station. So I'm a Texas boy through and through. And since I've been here, I have done some research. I've had this case report that I've presented, and as of last week, I had accepted to a journal. So I'll be first author on that paper. Pretty cool. It's been a journey to be here. So I would say my tips for success for anyone who wants to be kind of doing summer internships, I would say if you apply to about 15 internships per cycle, that would give you a pretty solid chance to have a couple good options, at least one. And that's applying very broad. Like the way it goes is you think like, there's your reach programs, then there's your like target programs, and then your safety programs. Get a good mix of different ones. And that's what I meant by like apply broadly. Don't just be applying to the big name ones, because then you might be left without many options at the end of the road, but make sure you have something. So make sure you have a lot of safeties as well. And like I said, business cards are key. I think if I hadn't been handing out business cards at AberCamps 2018, then I would not have had the summer internship at NIH. And who knows if I would have been in medical school this time. So before I guess I should move on to my current research. So this is something that I just got going about a month ago. So it's in really, really early stages. So basically I'm working with some ENTs here at our hospital at Texas A&M. And one of the, I guess our PI was reading the guidelines and realized that some of the research that one of the guidelines specifically was based on was the guideline acknowledged that the research was a little shaky. So he said, okay, well, we're going to take a lot of our patients and see if we can add some strength and maybe change the guideline. Basically, any child under the age of 3 is automatically admitted for overnight observation and for after you get a tonsillectomy. And the big issue with that is a lot of children are being admitted needlessly, because in the experience of the surgeons, they just come see the patient in the morning, give them a good clean bill of health, and they're sent off. So it's really not adding to the patient care. So what we're going to try to do is evaluate whether patients who are 2 to 2.5 years old have increased risk of complications at the same rate as children who are 2.5 to 3 years old, and use those as our two groups. And if we find that there's, significant differences in complications or not, maybe we'll be able to recommend that the guidelines be reduced from automatic admissions at 3 years old to maybe 2.5 years old. And that would save a lot of stress and financial burden on the patients and family. So I have a little flow chart here that I've written out, and at the moment I've just finished writing the Irb Protocol Draft. This is something you have to do if you're working with human subjects, and we are very soon, like in the next day or two, going to be submitting this for approval. I was able to get a bunch of my classmates to help to help be authors. on this, because we're going to have several thousand charts to go through to be harvesting data. And hopefully we can get that going in the next couple weeks. And after we collect all that data, we're going to run some statistical analyses and hopefully have a paper pumped out. So I have a minute or two left. I'll just say, if you have any questions for me, please reach out. I didn't really know what I was doing whenever I was applying to medical school, and I made a lot of errors. And I'm luckily in a position now where I'm on the admissions committee at Texas A&M, actually performing interviews during the interview season for potential applicants and giving them, the yes, no, should they be admitted to our school. And I do, when I have the time, I do mock interviews in a very similar style to the ones that I do for our actual interview process. So if you're interested in doing something like that, please reach out. I have my email here in the bottom left. Kind of just reach out. We'll get something set up. If you want any sort of advice, if you want to do a mock interview, please let me know. And if you just have any questions, that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. To all our attendees, use this opportunity, reach out to Matthew. We have next, Alejandra.
So my name is Alejandra Rosario Crespo. I am from Puerto Rico and I go to the University of Puerto Rico at Calle. I am a junior studying biology. And today I'll be talking about my road to research, specifically in undergrad. It's not as straight as this curved road. I feel like it's more of like it definitely has more curves than what this has. And I'll be talking a little bit more about how I stumble upon these opportunities and how I look for them. So yeah. First off, when I got in as a freshman, it was really scary because I knew studying biology, I wasn't really interested in medical school, but I didn't know what my other options were. And I find that programs such as NIH RISE, which is the Research Training Initiative for Students, enhancement program, that program really created it was a great avenue for me to be exposed to different seminars, different people, networking opportunities, and a lot of science workshops from visiting universities. And they have a lot of resources that really help students find what they're interested in the lab, outside the lab, career-wise, and connect with really awesome people. And it was through this program, after being a freshman there, that I found my research mentor at my current institution. However, this opportunity came about when I took a workshop from this professor called Juan Santana. However, it was a computational chemistry workshop, but I fell completely in love with the research. So I was a little conflicted because as a biology major, why are you doing computational chemistry research? And the opportunity came about to join the lab after meeting that mentor and making a great connection, and him inviting me into the lab to learn a little bit more about computational work and chemistry and molecular imaging. So with that, I joined UPenn's PREM program, which is focused on material science. And that opportunity again went about just networking and meeting mentors and taking a workshop I had kind of no experience in, but wanted to explore a new topic and try out. So after that, the pandemic hit, and it was my second semester as a freshman. So it was a little intimidating because I knew I wanted to do a lot of research, not only in the summer, but in the semester as much as possible. And the pandemic obviously didn't really help that. However, that kind of lit a fire in me because I knew I wanted to reach out to a lot of people to see what my options were. And through the RISE program, I was able to interview for a summer internship that was now being virtual at Baylor University. It was called the Baylor Transdisciplinary Research Undergraduate Experience, Be True. And it was an experience that was really, really great as an introduction because we focused on journal clubbing and literature review and writing a lot of things as like preparing for grant writing. And it was a great grad school future 101 in science, and if you're interested in that. But yeah, after that, I really wanted the next summer, which is last summer for me, I really wanted to try and get an internship in person. again, the pandemic is still going on. So there were a lot of limited options, but a great resource that I found was the Leadership Alliance. And if you've never heard of it, it's basically, again, an alliance of different research universities, and you apply to different ones, sort of like the common application when you're applying to college. So you choose 3 institutions and your research interest, and then you submit one application and they all review it. And maybe you're accepted into 1, 2, 3, or none. And luckily I was accepted into the Vanderbilt University Summer Science Academy in the molecular biology program, researching cancer biology. And luckily it was one of the few internships that actually was in person. So I had a great first in-person research internship last summer. The resources provided by the Leadership Alliance were incredible, and the people at the Vanderbilt program were just really, really great. I felt really supported because as a sophomore who had very little in-lab experience, everyone helped me with open arms, and they were there for anything. And it was my first exposure to what now I focus on in my research, which is cancer biology. I'm very passionate about it, and this experience, getting to see a day in the life of a PI and a grad student and working in a really cool lab, opened my eyes to the possibilities, and it was a great experience overall. And specifically, that research is the one that I presented at my first ever conference, which is SACNAS last October. It was really, really fun. I was a little concerned because it was digital. It was going to be a very different experience. I was quite literally in this corner for a few days, just going to every single opening meeting and just, every booth. It was actually very fun. I felt really integrated. I love that SACNAS was my first ever conference because it can be very intimidating, especially as someone that comes from a very small college and doesn't have that much experience. SACNAS' whole message of like bringing your full self to the table and embracing who you are and culture and your identity, I thought that was really encouraging to someone who, like, it was my first conference and I was presenting and I was nervous. I felt really like hugged by a community, even though it was virtual. And yeah, I was really, really happy to present. I got an award for it. It was really great. My judges were incredible, and they gave me a lot of great feedback. And yeah, I'm involved with SACNAS at my chapter in my university. So I really love SACNAS for that. And fun fact, next SACNAS this October is actually in Puerto Rico. It's like 40 minutes from where I live. So I can't wait. If any of you are coming, if you're applying, please do. We'll have a great time. I'm certainly gonna apply. And the person that actually made this year's logo is Dr. Semar Quiñones, who is actually got matched with me during SACNAS last year as my mentor pal. So SACNAS has this great program during the conference where you get matched with a possible mentor of the SACNAS community, and you get to ask them a lot of questions about what you want, about summer internships, about everything. And I got to meet her because she was my mentor, and she is still my mentor outside of the conference and outside of SACNAS. She's helped me so much with current summer internships and everything, and she's just an overall amazing person. And that is one of the many people I met during SACNAS. Another awesome person I met during SACNAS was Dr. Mandana Sastanfar. It was like 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and I decided to join the booth at MIT. Basically, how SACNAS set it up online is that you had all this information about the summer internships and the opportunities, and then you could just join the Zoom. It was a little intimidating because I just joined and it was just me and the director of outreach at MIT and the summer internship director. But that led me to just talking to her freely and just really being myself and asking a lot of questions. And she just happened to bring up an opportunity that I took her upon, which was the Quantitative Methods workshop during a week in January, which is a workshop dedicated to teach undergrads about computational work, and specifically in biology, using Python and MATLAB. So I did that in January of this year. and hadn't I met Mandana during the SACNAS conference in the booth, I would have never found out about this experience, nor would I have found out about the summer internship at MIT. And I'll be participating in this summer internship this summer in a few days. So I'm very grateful for SACNAS for setting up this booth and networking. The emphasis they put on it is really awesome. And in the future, I'll be working also here in Puerto Rico in the medical sciences campus in cancer research, again, through the many people that it takes to organize these activities that make you network and do all these things. So these are a little recollection of my tips. Take the opportunities to meet new people. It can be very daunting, but I just try to convince myself that, you know, this is an interaction I'm having, and then in the future, you know, it could just come up later and help you later and have a normal conversation with someone. My version of Matthew's business cards are emails. I send a lot of emails. Cold emails are fine. I've made my peace with them and they're very helpful. Find really helpful mentors. You never need to know exactly where you're going in your road to research, but just follow your passions and don't be afraid to make mistakes, and follow the science in your interests, and you'll be just fine. And nobody has this figured out. So now I'll get into my research that I did at Vanderbilt University, which is titled Introducing Inhibitors to Primary Glioblastoma Tumor Cultures to Characterize and Target Aggressive Cell Subsets. So for background purposes, glioblastoma multiforme is a fast-growing type of malignant brain tumor. At the Irish lab, which is the lab I worked at Vanderbilt, we have, through different analysis, categorized different subpopulation of cells within a tumor. So we have also characterized these cells by biomarkers, and they're related to prognosis outcomes, basically life expectancy after they receive a prognosis for the cancer. So one of the populations of subsets of cells is called glioblastoma negative prognostic and glioblastoma positive prognostic. And I'll be focusing on specifically targeting glioblastoma negative prognostic cells and exploring how different processes make it that it contributes to prognosis outcomes and poor prognosis outcomes. And a breakdown of how are we planning to block or inhibit these cells specifically. We know from previous research that GNP cells, let me find my laser pointer. GNP cells express S100B, SOX2, phosphostat5, and phosphox6. But these are just proteins that specifically tell you or set apart GNP cells. And we found that specifically knowing these markers, we want to target different cellular pathways that these cells use to make themselves grow and do all these things. What would happen if we were to block them? Would it have a negative effect? Would it have a positive effect? So we first targeted an RTK, which is a receptor tyrosine kinase, with the drug imatinib. So you'll see it's purple, and it's purple because it hits both of these pathways downstream as well. And we introduced two other inhibitors to these different pathways, rapamycin, which is blocking the AKT-mTOR pathway, and tofacitinib, which is targeting the JAK-STAT pathway. And these pathways, again, have a really important role of the cell survival. And for our methodology, we took a tumor sample from the Vanderbilt General Hospital, and we cultured these cells. And what that means is that we placed them in petri dishes with a medium that best recreates the brain microenvironment. And we found that was embryonic neural stem cell media. After 6 days of culture, we treated the cells, which means as we introduced each inhibitor separately and a control which had no inhibitor, and we had left that for 24 hours. And after that, we collected our samples and loaded them onto a machine that's called mass cytometry. And what that machine does is that it basically, we get the cells and they're fixed, which means they're like frozen in time. And we add antibodies to them that have metals on them. And when we load them onto a mass cytometer, what we can do is that we can trace the we can trace the metals with the antibodies that are linked to the cells, and therefore we get different arrays and different density plots that let us know the different activity that's going on in the cell. So for our results, this is what a density plot looks like. You're looking for different areas and different colors. So here we can see that these are our controls. So we see an expression of SOX2 and S100B, which let us know that there are GNP cells there in our normal cells. Here we have the results of each inhibitor. And what we can see is that compared to the control, the imatinib, which is, again, the receptor inhibitor at the top of the chain, had the biggest impact because we had a decrease of the expression of both markers, therefore GNP cells. Here, we decided to look at imatinib a little closer, looking specifically for differentiation markers. And we saw a lack of differentiation markers and a higher expression of SOX2. What happens is SOX2 is a neural stem cell marker. And what we believe happens is that instead of these cells being their normal differentiated GNP cells, after the treatment with imatinib, they're behaving more stem-like, which is very dangerous for cancer overall. And we found that in the literature, treatment with imatinib, which is a commercialized drug, it's also called Gleevec, patients with leukemia specifically after receiving this treatment went into remission, which means their cancer is controlled. After a few months, they received the cancer back in a more aggressive resistant form to that treatment and other treatments of inhibitors. So hopefully this project aimed to contribute to understanding the role of imatinib as a used drug for cancer and glioblastoma multiforme overall. So I would like to thank my mentors during that summer, Stephanie Medina, Dr. Jonathan M. Irish, and Dr. Elizabeth Billman. If you have any questions or if you want to reach out, I have my email at the beginning of the presentation. I'll also put it in the chat. But yeah, thank you again, SACNAS, for letting me share my road to research.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you for sharing your science and your story. To all our attendees, if you have any questions to Alejandra, feel free to submit via chat, or you can reach out to her directly. And then lastly, but not least, we have Paula.
Hello, everyone. I have a little bit of extra time. First, I want to say how honored I feel to be in this panel with Matthew and Alejandra. Your guys' work is amazing, and I'm so thankful that SACNAS put us together for this. Is everyone seeing the presentation? Not the... Okay, cool. So first, if people could put in the chat what discipline they are, like biology, chemistry, as Alejandra knows, there's probably a mix of stuff, so you can put stuff just so that I know a little bit. My presentation, I'm in psychology, so it's a little bit different from what you have seen from Matthew and Alejandra, but I have experience in more bio background, so I would love to hear what everyone in the group is today. Let me okay, awesome. Physics, molecular biochem, bioengineering, a lot of cool stuff. And so, yes, I'm Paola Montúfar Soria. I'm a first-year PhD student at NYU's Developmental Psychology program in the Applied Psychology department. I work with Dr. Jilliana Melsi, and today I'm going to share my research trajectory that is centered on bilingual Latina children's early math experiences and early math development. If you have any questions about why I say Latina instead of Latinx, I'd be happy to talk about it in the Q&A. So, first, I want to actually talk about the why of my research interests, and it's going to come explained also through my research path. So It comes from my personal experience. So I'm a Mexican immigrant. I moved to the US when I was 15, and I moved to San Antonio, Texas, which really has a large Latina and Spanish English bilingual community. And it was really this experience that made me fascinated by the unique learning experiences that bilingual Latina families engage in, but also the cultural aspects that for me contrasted sharply to what my white American friends were experiencing. Things like the sobremesa, where like in Mexico, where everyone stays at home after everyone stays at a table after a meal to talk at the table, but also specific language practices, things like code switching. So becoming what my family back in Mexico says pocha, like saying things in el idioma que me salgan. So I also saw that these in this context that these practices, both the cultural one and the linguistic ones, were not really regarded as valuable. So things from having people look down on my dad for his thick accent, despite his wealth of knowledge. I mean, the man is doing a PhD in electrical engineering at his 60 years of age, and also, of course, the long history of language suppression, particularly in Texas, where a lot of families have lost Spanish over generations. And also current quote unquote bilingual programs that really are just trying to move students to an all English curricula. And so based on this experience, I did some research as an undergrad. So I lived in San Antonio, Texas. I went to the University of Texas at San Antonio. I started with a major in bio, but I actually moved to psychology because it allowed me to have a more flexible plan of studies where I could take classes in psych, in biology. I ended up having a biology minor, and also in education because I was really interested in how these systems work together. I worked in a neurobiology lab with Dr. Nicole Wicha, who is right here. And my primary mentors were doctoral students, Vanessa Cerda, Amandine Garnier, and Matthew Wood. They became really close friends. And in this lab, we worked with electroencephalography, EEG, that you can see here. I'm putting a cap on someone. And this is what I did for 4 years. So from my very first year as a freshman, I looked for Dr. Wicha because of my interest in bilingualism, I found her in like the list of faculty and the research that they were doing. And I saw that she was also Mexican and that she was doing research with bilinguals and specifically math. And I love math like from a young age. Like I always liked math, so I was like, okay, I like math, I like bilinguals. Let's put it together. And so for the work that we did in the lab, basically we were looking at the underlying cognitive processes of math processing in the bilinguals 2 languages, and we did this with college age adults and with 3rd to 5th graders. And so we were basically trying to see if the brain process math facts, specifically arithmetic facts, things multiplications, things like 2 times 4 equals 8 and 2 por 4 es 8, as if they process them differently across their 2 languages. Because there's a long research of there's a bilingual advantage on you have not a bilingual advantage, there's an advantage if you're bilingual on your first language or the language that you learned it on, but that's been always done behaviorally. So you might find an answer oh my God, Kieran, yes, Kieran's the best. So he worked also at the lab. I just wanted to address a comment in the chat. Thank you, Matthew. But basically the arithmetic facts, we wanted to see if they were different because the differences that had been seen before had only been in how fast they were responding or how accurate they were. And so this is the project that I did. This is the kind of research that I did as an undergrad and what ended up being my honors thesis, which has been recently published. And I'd be happy to share if anybody wants to know what our results were at the end for college age adults. Oh yes, so Matthew just for everyone in the chat, Matthew put that Kieran right here is a first year med student. Yes, thank you. For my thesis work, I was focusing on college age adults, and basically what we found actually is that even though they were behaviorally faster and more accurate in the language that they learned it in, their cognitive processes as reflected by EEG were not significantly different across their two languages. So it's possible that the differences that we're seeing behaviorally are a result of something other than the processing. It's possibly just practice or something that might also be in our population. So we worked with really balanced bilinguals, so bilinguals that were equally strong in both their languages. So it's also possible that the research that has been done, it has only been done with recent bilinguals or bilinguals who are stronger in their first language. And so all of this research really showed me the importance of who are we doing the research for, and who are we're doing the research with, and what kind of conclusions we're drawing from this work. So this was a really big formative experience. And during my undergrad, you can see here on the left, this was my first conference. It was at the university conference. And over here was the work that I did over the summer in San Diego, California at UCSD, University of California, San Diego. I would like to also give a shout out to RISE. I'm so happy, Alejandra, that RISE is working. It worked great for you too. I love RISE, the undergraduate program. I am an international student, so this is a federal program, but thankfully in my school, they had a program called RISE 2, and basically they had institutional funds to support students. I also feel very passionate about supporting students who may not be able to access federal funds for citizenship requirement reasons. So if any of you or any people that you know feels that they can't get into undergrad research because of this barrier, I will put my email at the end, and feel free to ask me questions now or send me an email later. It's definitely doable, but it's definitely harder because it is a hurdle to not have the citizenship, because really wonderful things like RISE and all of the awesome undergrad programs that Alejandra were talking about are federally funded and therefore close to a lot of students, but there's other options. And so the big one was I was very thankful to have been in RISE 2, which was a lot of institutional funds that I was able to pay for my education and do research without having to work extra. And also Enlace, so at UCSD, there's this program specifically for Mexican students that you can get a scholarship for, and it's not limited by citizenship, and you do research with a faculty mentor. And at the university, it's a really, really wonderful program, both from RISE and from Enlace. I've gained friendships that have, like to this day, these are some of my closest friends. So I think one of my sprinkles of advice as we go is that it's really important to find communities of support, both in your institution and if you have an opportunity to go to summer programs. It really helps to have someone really understand the position that you're in, and to understand the specific struggles that you're going through, and if they're also from your same cultural background. In my experience, it has been really helpful. I mean, my friends from San Diego, we recently texted because they're also in PhD programs, and we were like, oh my God, I feel like an imposter. So all of these things that we help each other through. So I would say building a community is really important. And talking a little bit about SACNAS, so my first experience with SACNAS was in 2018, where the conference was actually in San Antonio, and RISE paid for registration for us. These are Celeste, Liz, and Sebastian, which are three of my closest friends from RISE that we went to SACNAS together with. I went to SACNAS with. And these two pictures are activities that we did with the SACNAS chapter at UTSA. So we had some socials, we had some talks, both about science and both about just being a student and mental health issues. And this one specifically was about a teacher workshop that we did, basically showing around the different labs at UTSA to local teachers, and so that they could inform their work in science. So this was these things right here were my first into SACNAS. I really loved the mission and vision of this institution. And so I was a fan from the beginning. And then I was super grateful to have been able to attend also Hawaii 2019, like you, Matthew. It was a wonderful, I would agree. It's really wonderful that we got to do that before the pandemic. I felt really honored to present my work on my thesis, which you can see here. Again, more than happy to elaborate on that work or send you the paper if you want. And really honored to have been awarded recognition for presenting in the psychology category. And this in SACNAS 2019, I was really nervous because even though I had done posters before both in my like internally at the school and at the summer program, and this was my first big conference, and it was kind of overwhelming. So in terms of like presenting advice for presenting, I would always say like take deep breaths and drink a lot of water and have people go over the presentation with you, and people who are not in your field, so that you can make sure that you're phrasing things in a way that is understandable from people from different backgrounds. I think that was also something that Rice was really helpful for. We had people from I mean, like just looking at this chat, people from biophysics, people from physics, different chemistry, biology. I was from psych, so it was really helpful for us to listen to each other talk. And when we were getting too jargony, be like, okay, wait, backtrack, explain it to me. And of course, when you're talking to people in your field, being jargony is okay. But I think one of the things that I think STEM and like all fields can really move more towards is making science more accessible. So if you get a chance to do that, that would be awesome. And so yes, feel free to ask me questions about this experience, the presentation, SACNAS chapters, undergrad research programs, all that stuff. But today I'll also talk a little bit about my current questions. So after I did all of my research and everything, I applied to 10 programs, 10 PhD programs in different areas. So in psychology, in I think one in neuro, in human development and family sciences, just different places. I think my advice on that, I have a lot of advice on graduate school applications, so you can tell me, you can ask any questions, but about the graduate school application process. But I think one of the biggest ones is look for advisors, not programs. A lot of people that I was really interested in their work weren't in the programs that I was initially looking at, because I was like, I have to go to this type of psychology or this type of neuro, and I didn't end up doing more neuro stuff. So because that was not something that I was as much as passionate about as this stuff that I'm going to talk about next. So yes, I would say like look at the people rather than the programs, look at the people rather than the institution. That also as well. I think sometimes we can get a little carried away by the name, and if it's not really something you're passionate about, then it kind of loses the meaning. So yes, the current question that I'm looking to address in my research as a grad student, as a PhD student, and again, this is only my first year, so subject to change. People don't come after me if in a couple of years I change it up. So it's how do bilingual Latina children learn math during early childhood, which is a really big, broad question. And I am looking to address it in two approaches. The first is how do bilingual Latina children learn math during early childhood through their family practices? What are Latina families' practices, both cultural and linguistic? What do they engage in that help them support math in early childhood? And what are the individual processes of bilingual Latina children that help them support their early math development? Like, what is it about being bilingual that may help support your math development? In terms of the family practices question and the cultural, the project that I work on this year was the project I call Teach and Play project. This is where families, mother-child dyads were given some toys, and the mothers were told, teach your child how to set the table, and they were video recorded. And basically, we're looking at how do mothers include play, if at all, during their teaching processes and like their specific teaching practices. There's been a lot of research about Latina mothers being way more directive and controlling, and that being not very effective approach, but really is that it's centering a white approach and decentering practices that are not like that. And so what we're trying to do with this project is say, no, like it's possible that these other cultural practices are supporting the early learning. And so basically what I've been doing all of this year is doing a lot of reading. I developed a coding scheme. So when we look at the videos, we code every 10 seconds what is happening. And we also code at the utterance level. So every single thing they say, we say what type of teaching strategy it is, if any teaching strategy at all, and what kind of play are they engaging in. So this is what I've been doing pretty much all year, and what I'm hoping to do also in the summer, finish it up. And I'm also engaging on other projects in the lab that I'd be happy to talk about, one about science, early science. And the individual processes one is the one that I want to start, that's going to be collecting data on my own. And I mean, on my own, we're all basically a team, but it's going to be looking at in this area of research in psychology, math and language has usually been assessed separate. So your two languages are assessed separately, and math is assessed in Spanish and in English. But there's this theory called translanguaging theory, which is arguing that language is a social construct, and that in your mind, you're not really separating English and Spanish. So you have a full lexical system that you access. And so we want to assess students in having access to all of their lexical system to then evaluate the impact of math vocabulary on numeracy. So yes, that's also a little bit specific. Be happy to talk more details if you have. And I just want to close this with this concept of ganas. So some of you may be familiar with it. In Spanish, this basically means passion, aspiration, and drive all in one. And I think this applies to how I feel about this work. I have a lot of ganas to work on this, but I also feel like it applies to Latina families' philosophies. There's a lot of ganas to learn and grow and achieve. And I'm hoping that with this work, I'm giving a grain of sand to contribute families, to empowering them, to contribute to empowering them in their ganas. And I feel like this is how I've felt ever since my undergrad. I've always had a lot of ganas to do research. And so I think kind of my final piece of advice here is finding what do you have ganas for? And you've seen wonderful examples here with Matthew and Alejandra. So I hope that you find it too. And yeah, have any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you so much for your stories, your experiences, and from our attendees for this wonderful questions and engagement. See you soon. Bye.